A millionaire disguises himself as a university professor to test his son's girlfriend. He observes every detail, trying to confirm his suspicions, until he discovers something about the young woman that horrifies him. Interested you? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The San Francisco skyline glittered in the late afternoon sun, its iconic silhouette a testament to human ambition and ingenuity. From the top floor of Montero Enterprises headquarters, Leonardo Montero gazed out at the city he'd helped shape. His weathered hands, calloused from years of hard work, rested on the cool glass. At 62, he still cut an impressive figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with a head of salt and pepper hair that belied his age. As he turned from the window, his eyes fell on the framed photos adorning his desk. One in particular caught his attention, a young man with Leonardo's sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes, grinning widely as he held up a university acceptance letter. Raphael, his only son and the light of his life. A knock on the door interrupted his reverie. "Come in," Leonardo called, his voice deep and authoritative. His assistant, Maria, stepped into the office. "Mr. Montero, your son is here to see you." Leonardo's face lit up. "Send him in, please." Moments later, Raphael strode into the room, exuding the confidence of youth and privilege. At 22, he was the spitting image of his father in his prime, tall, handsome, with an easy charm that made people gravitate towards him. "Dad!" Raphael exclaimed, embracing his father warmly. "I've got great news," Leonardo chuckled, patting his son's back. "Well, don't keep me in suspense, son. What's got you so excited?" Raphael pulled back, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "I've been accepted into the MBA program at Stanford. Can you believe it?" Pride swelled in Leonardo's chest. This was everything he'd ever wanted for his son, the best education, the best opportunities, a chance to follow in his footsteps and take Montero Enterprises to even greater heights. "That's fantastic, Raphael," Leonardo beamed, clasping his son's shoulder. "So I always knew you had it in you. This calls for a celebration. How about dinner tonight at the Cliff House?" Raphael's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, actually, Dad, I was hoping to celebrate with Laura tonight. You remember her, right? My girlfriend from undergrad?" Leonardo's expression remained neutral, but a flicker of unease passed through his eyes. Of course, he remembered Laura. How could he forget? She'd been a constant presence in Raphael's life for the past 2 years. Intelligent, beautiful, and charismatic, she seemed perfect. Almost too perfect. "Ah, yes, Laura," Leonardo said, his tone carefully measured. "Well, why don't you bring her along? I'd love to get to know her better." Raphael's face lit up again. "Really? That'd be great, Dad. I'll give her a call right away." As Raphael pulled out his phone to make the arrangements, Leonardo returned to the window, his reflection superimposed over the city beyond. He watched his son's animated conversation, a mixture of love and concern washing over him. Later that evening, the Cliff House restaurant buzzed with the quiet energy of San Francisco's elite. Leonardo, Raphael, and Laura sat at a prime table overlooking the Pacific Ocean, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Laura, with her flowing chestnut hair and warm brown eyes, looked stunning in a modest yet elegant black dress. She carried herself with a poise that seemed beyond her years, engaging Leonardo in conversation about the latest business trends and economic forecasts. "You know, Mr. Montero," Laura said, her voice confident but not arrogant, "I recently attended a fascinating lecture by Professor Leandro Montero on sustainable business practices. His insights on balancing profit with social responsibility were truly inspiring." Leonardo's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Leandro, my brother gave a lecture at your university?" Raphael nodded, swallowing a bite of his steak. "Yeah, it was a special guest lecture series. Laura's been raving about it for weeks." "It was incredible," Laura continued, her eyes shining with genuine enthusiasm. "Professor Montero's approach to ethical decision-making in corporate environments is revolutionary. I can see where you get your business acumen from, Mr. Montero." Leonardo forced a smile, but his mind was racing. Leandro, his twin brother, had always been the academic of the family. While Leonardo had built his empire from the ground up, Leandro had pursued a career in academia, becoming a renowned professor of business ethics and management. They drifted apart over the years, their paths diverging as sharply as their personalities. Well, I'm glad you found it enlightening, Leonardo said, his tone carefully neutral. Leandro has always had a unique perspective on business matters. As the conversation flowed, Leonardo found himself studying Laura more closely. She was undeniably intelligent and well-spoken, her insights into business and economics impressively nuanced for someone her age. But there was something else, a hunger in her eyes that Leonardo recognized all too well. It was the same look he'd seen in the mirror all those years ago when he was building his company from nothing. Was it ambition he saw, or something more calculated? The waiter arrived with dessert, momentarily breaking Leonardo's train of thought. As Raphael and Laura shared a chocolate souffle, their heads bent close together, whispering and laughing, Leonardo couldn't shake the growing unease in the pit of his stomach. He'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to see his legacy potentially compromised. Raphael was young, still naive in many ways. Could he truly see Laura for who she was? Or was he blinded by young love and her undeniable charm? As the evening drew to a close, Leonardo made a decision. He couldn't leave this to chance. He needed to know for certain what Laura's intentions were. And to do that, he needed to see her in action, away from the influence of his son and the Montero name. An idea began to form in his mind, audacious and potentially disastrous, but too tempting to ignore. If Laura had been so impressed by Leandro's lecture, perhaps it was time for the Montero twins to switch places once again, just like they'd done as children. It was risky, possibly unethical, but Leonardo had built his empire on calculated risks. And when it came to protecting his son and his legacy, he was willing to do whatever it took. As they said their goodbyes outside the restaurant, Leonardo hugged Raphael tightly, then turned to Laura with a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It was wonderful to see you again, Laura," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "I have a feeling we'll be seeing a lot more of each other in the future." Laura beamed, completely unaware of the wheels turning in Leonardo's mind. "I hope so, Mr. Montero. Thank you for a lovely evening." As he watched the young couple drive away, Leonardo pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. "Leandro, it's Leo. We need to talk." "How do you feel about taking a sabbatical?" The following weekend found Leonardo Montero standing outside a modest craftsman-style house in Berkeley, his designer suit looking out of place in the laid-back neighborhood. He hesitated for a moment before ringing the doorbell, steeling himself for the conversation to come. The door swung open, revealing a face identical to his own, yet markedly different. Leandro Montero, despite being Leonardo's twin, had a softer countenance, his features relaxed by years of academic pursuit rather than the cutthroat world of business. His hair, while just as grey as Leonardo's, was longer and more disheveled. He wore a comfortable cardigan over a wrinkled button-down shirt, a far cry from Leonardo's impeccable tailoring. "Leo," Leandro said, his voice a mix of surprise and wariness. "It's been a while." Leonardo nodded, suddenly feeling like a teenager again, standing on his brother's porch. "Thanks for agreeing to see me, Leandro. May I come in?" Leandro stepped aside, gesturing for Leonardo to enter. The interior of the house was cluttered but cozy, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lining every wall. Stacks of papers and open textbooks covered nearly every surface. "Sorry about the mess," Leandro said, clearing some papers from the couch. "I wasn't expecting company." Leonardo sat down, his posture rigid compared to Leandro's relaxed slouch in a nearby armchair. "I appreciate you making time for me on such short notice." Leandro raised an eyebrow. "Well, when my estranged twin brother calls out of the blue asking to meet, it tends to pique one's curiosity." "What's this about, Leo?" Leonardo leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I need a favor, Leandro, a big one." "Of course you do," Leandro sighed, running a hand through his unruly hair. "I never were one for social calls. What is it this time? Need me to bail out another one of your ethically questionable subsidiaries?" Leonardo bristled at the jab, but forced himself to remain calm. "It's about Raphael." At the mention of his nephew's name, Leandro's expression softened. Despite the brothers' estrangement, Leandro had always had a soft spot for Raphael. "Is he all right?" "He's fine," Leonardo assured him quickly. "More than fine, actually. He's just been accepted into Stanford's MBA program." A genuine smile spread across Leandro's face. "That's wonderful news. You must be proud." Leonardo nodded, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "I am. But there's a complication." Leandro's smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. What kind of complication? Leonardo took a deep breath, steeling himself. His girlfriend, Laura, I'm not sure about her intentions. Leandro's brow furrowed. What do you mean? She's brilliant, charming, seems perfect in every way, Leonardo explained, his voice tight. But I can't shake the feeling that she might be more interested in the Montero fortune than in Raphael himself. Leandro leaned back in his chair, studying his brother. And what evidence do you have of this? Leonardo shifted uncomfortably. It's just a feeling, call it intuition. Ah yes, Leandro said dryly, the famous Montero intuition. The same intuition that led you to acquire that oil company right before the market crashed. Leonardo's jaw clenched. That was different. This is about family. Leandro sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. All right, Leo. What does any of this have to do with me? Leonardo leaned forward, his eyes intense. I need to observe Laura in an academic setting, away from the influence of the Montero name. I need to see how she acts when she thinks no one's watching. Realization dawned on Leandro's face, quickly followed by disbelief. No, absolutely not. You can't be serious. I am, Leonardo pressed on. You're scheduled to teach a summer course on business ethics, aren't you? I need you to take a sabbatical. Let me take your place. Leandro stood up abruptly, pacing the cluttered living room. Have you lost your mind? You want me to let you impersonate me? A respected professor? To spy on your son's girlfriend? Leonardo rose as well, his voice urgent. Just for the summer course, 6 weeks, that's all I'm asking. I'll compensate you generously, of course. Leandro whirled around, his eyes flashing with anger. This isn't about money, Leo. It's about ethics, something you've always struggled with. The word stung, but Leonardo pressed on. I know it's unorthodox. Unorthodox? Leandro interrupted, incredulous. It's insane, not to mention potentially illegal. Do you have any idea what would happen to my career if this got out? Leonardo held up his hands placatingly. It won't. I've thought this through. We're identical twins, Leandro. No one will know the difference. And it's just for 6 weeks. Leandro shook his head, collapsing back into his armchair. Even if I agreed to this madness, which I'm not saying I do, how do you expect to pull it off? You're a businessman, not an academic. You can't just walk into a classroom and start lecturing on business ethics. A sly smile spread across Leonardo's face. You'd be surprised what I can do when properly motivated. Besides, who do you think funded your education all those years ago? I've picked up a thing or two about business ethics along the way. Leandro studied his brother, a mix of emotions playing across his face. After a long moment, he spoke, his voice quiet. You really believe this girl is a threat to Raphael? Leonardo nodded solemnly. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. Leandro closed his eyes, rubbing his temples. When he opened them again, there was a resignation in his gaze. If, and I stress if, I were to agree to this insanity, what exactly would you hope to accomplish? Leonardo sat back down, leaning towards his brother. I need to see how Laura behaves in class, how she interacts with her peers, how she handles ethical dilemmas. I need to know if she's the person she presents herself to be. Leandro shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. And what if she is? What if you're wrong about her? Then I'll gladly admit my mistake and welcome her into the family with open arms, Leonardo said firmly. Leandro studied his brother for a long moment, searching for any sign of deception. Finally, he sighed heavily. I must be out of my mind, but all right, I'll do it. Leonardo's eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't actually expected Leandro to agree. You will? Leandro held up a warning finger. On 2 conditions. First, this stays between us. Raphael doesn't find out, and neither does anyone else. Second, when this is over, regardless of what you discover, you make things right with Raphael. No more manipulations, no more schemes. You talk to him openly and honestly. Deal? Leonardo nodded solemnly, extending his hand. Deal. As the brothers shook hands, sealing their unlikely pact, neither could shake the feeling that they were setting in motion events that would change their lives forever. Outside, the sun was setting over the Berkeley hills, casting long shadows across the quiet street. Inside the cluttered living room, 2 identical men, one a titan of industry, the other a respected academic, began to plan an elaborate deception that would test the bonds of family, love, and trust. Little did they know, their carefully laid plans were about to collide with the unpredictable forces of youth, ambition, and the human heart. The first day of the summer session dawned bright and clear, the Berkeley campus buzzing with the energy of eager students. Among them walked a figure that, to the untrained eye, appeared to be Professor Leandro Montero. But beneath the carefully cultivated academic facade was Leonardo, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He'd spent the past 2 weeks immersing himself in Leandro's world, poring over lecture notes, familiarizing himself with current academic theories, and practicing his brother's mannerisms. The glasses perched on his nose felt foreign, as did the tweed jacket that was a far cry from his usual tailored suits. But as he approached Wheeler Hall, Leonardo steeled himself. He was a master of adaptation in the business world. Surely he could conquer academia as well. The lecture hall fell silent as he entered, all eyes turning to the front of the room. Leonardo surveyed the sea of young faces, his gaze lingering for a moment on Laura, who sat in the second row, her posture straight and attentive. Beside her was Raphael, his presence both a comfort and a complication. Leonardo had known his son would be in the class. It was part of why he'd chosen this particular course, but seeing him there, unaware of the deception unfolding before him, sent a pang of guilt through Leonardo's chest. Pushing the feeling aside, Leonardo cleared his throat and began. "Good morning, class. Welcome to Business Ethics and Leadership in the Modern Era. I'm Professor Carlos Montero, and I'll be your guide through this complex and often contentious subject." The name change had been Leandro's idea, a small deception to make the larger one easier to swallow. As Leonardo launched into his carefully prepared lecture, he found himself slipping into the role with surprising ease. Years of board meetings and shareholder presentations had honed his public speaking skills, and soon he was engaging the class in a lively discussion about the ethical implications of corporate decision-making. Laura's hand shot up frequently, her insights sharp and well-articulated. Leonardo called on her, watching closely as she debated points with her classmates. There was a fire in her eyes, a passion that seemed genuine, but was it a passion for knowledge or for the opportunities that knowledge could bring? As the class progressed, Leonardo introduced a case study, one he was intimately familiar with, though the students didn't know it. It was the story of a company that had to choose between maintaining a profitable but environmentally damaging operation and investing in costly green technology at the risk of short-term losses. "What would you do in this situation?" he asked the class. "Remember, as leaders, your decisions affect not just the bottom line, but the lives of your employees, the community, and the environment." The discussion that followed was heated, with students passionately arguing both sides. Laura's contribution caught Leonardo's attention. "While the ethical choice might seem clear-cut, we have to consider the broader implications," she said, her voice clear and confident. "Yes, investing in green technology is the right thing to do long-term, but what about the workers who might lose their jobs if the company's profits plummet? Isn't there an ethical obligation to them as well? Perhaps a phased approach would be better, allowing the company to transition gradually while minimizing job losses." Leonardo nodded, impressed despite himself. "An excellent point, Ms. Alvarez," Laura supplied. "Laura Alvarez." "Ms. Alvarez," Leonardo repeated, filing away the information. He hadn't known her last name before. "You've highlighted one of the key challenges in ethical decision-making, balancing competing obligations. Can anyone build on Ms. Alvarez's point?" As the discussion continued, Leonardo found his gaze drawn repeatedly to Laura. She engaged respectfully with her peers, even those who disagreed with her, and seemed genuinely interested in the subject matter. It was a far cry from the gold digger he'd half expected to see. At the end of the class, as students filed out, Laura approached the podium, Raphael at her side. Leonardo felt a moment of panic. Surely his own son would see through his disguise. But Raphael showed no sign of recognition beyond polite interest. "Great lecture, Professor," he said, his arm casually draped over Laura's shoulders. "I'm looking forward to the rest of the course." "Thank you, Mr. Leonardo said, maintaining his facade. "Montero," Raphael replied with a smile. "Rafael Montero." Leonardo raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "Any relation to the industrialist?" Raphael's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "He's my father." Interesting, Leonardo mused, studying his son's face. I've had some spirited debates with Leonardo Montero over the years about business ethics. I look forward to hearing your perspective in class. Laura squeezed Raphael's hand supportively before turning to Leonardo. Professor, I was wondering if you could recommend any additional readings on stakeholder theory. I found today's discussion fascinating and would love to delve deeper. Leonardo blinked, momentarily caught off guard by her earnest request. Of course, Ms. Alvarez. I'll compile a list and make it available to the whole class. It's always encouraging to see students so engaged with the material. As Laura and Raphael left the lecture hall, deep in conversation about the day's topics, Leonardo sat heavily in his chair. The class had gone well, better than he'd expected, if he was honest. But instead of confirming his suspicions about Laura, it had only complicated matters. She was intelligent, articulate, and seemed genuinely passionate about ethics and business, not at all the vapid gold digger he'd feared. And yet, there was still something that nagged at him, a hunger in her eyes that he recognized all too well. Leonardo packed up his materials, his mind racing. This was only the first day. He had 5 more weeks to uncover the truth about Laura Alvarez, and he was determined to do just that, no matter the cost. As he left Wheeler Hall, stepping into the warm California sunshine, Leonardo couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking a dangerous line. But it was too late to turn back now. The masquerade had begun, and he was committed to seeing it through to the end. Little did he know, his carefully constructed plan was already beginning to unravel, thread by delicate thread. As the weeks progressed, Leonardo found himself settling into an unexpected rhythm. The role of Professor Carlos Montero was becoming second nature, and he discovered a surprising enjoyment in the academic environment. The discussions were lively, the students eager to learn, and Leonardo found himself genuinely engaged in the material he was teaching, but his primary focus remained on Laura Alvarez. He watched her closely, both in and out of class. She was a model student, always prepared, articulate in her arguments, and respectful of her peers. Yet there was something about her that continued to nag at Leonardo, a sense that she was holding something back. It was during the 3rd week of the course that Leonardo decided to push harder. He assigned a group project, carefully manipulating the teams to ensure that Laura was paired with Mateus Silva, a scholarship student from Brazil who had caught Leonardo's attention with his sharp mind and humble demeanor. As the class broke into their groups to discuss the project, Leonardo circulated the room, listening in on conversations. When he approached Laura and Mateus, he was struck by their easy rapport. I was thinking we could focus on the ethical implications of AI in hiring practices, Laura was saying, her eyes alight with enthusiasm. It's a hot topic right now, and there are so many angles to explore. Mateus nodded, jotting down notes. That's a great idea. We could look at bias in algorithms, privacy concerns, the potential for discrimination. Exactly, Laura agreed. And we should consider the broader societal impacts too. What happens to human HR professionals if AI takes over? Is there an ethical way to balance efficiency with human judgment? Leonardo cleared his throat, making his presence known. An ambitious topic, he commented. How do you plan to address the potential benefits of AI in hiring? It's important to consider all sides of the issue. Laura and Mateus exchanged a glance before Laura spoke up. Of course, Professor. We were just getting started. We definitely want to present a balanced view. Good, Leonardo nodded. I'll be interested to see what you come up with. Don't forget to consider the perspective of the companies implementing these systems, not just the job seekers. As he walked away, Leonardo couldn't help but feel a twinge of admiration for Laura's quick thinking and Mateus's supportive demeanor. They made a good team, their strengths complementing each other well. Over the next few days, Leonardo observed Laura and Mateus working closely on their project. They spent hours in the library, heads bent together over laptops and stacks of books. Their dedication was impressive, but it also stirred an unexpected feeling in Leonardo: jealousy. He tried to rationalize it. He was here to protect Raphael, after all. If Laura was getting too close to Mateus, wasn't that a good thing? Proof that she wasn't as committed to Raphael as she claimed? But deep down, Leonardo knew he was grasping at straws. There was nothing inappropriate about Laura and Mateus's interactions. They were simply two dedicated students working hard on a challenging project. One evening, as Leonardo was leaving his office late, he overheard a conversation that made him pause. "Laura, you're pushing yourself too hard," Mateus's voice drifted from a nearby study room. "When was the last time you got a full night's sleep?" "I'm fine, Mateus," Laura replied, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "I just need to finish this section, then I can rest." "You said that 2 hours ago," Mateus countered gently. "Look, I know how much this means to you, but you can't keep burning the candle at both ends. Between this project, your other classes, and your 2 jobs, it's too much." Leonardo's eyebrows shot up. 2 jobs? He hadn't known about that. Laura sighed heavily. "I don't have a choice. The scholarship covers tuition but not living expenses, and I refuse to ask Raphael for help. I need to do this on my own." "I understand," Mateus said softly. "Believe me, I do. But you're going to burn out at this rate. At least let me take on more of the workload for this project." "No way," Laura protested. "You're working just as hard as I am. We're in this together, remember?" There was a moment of silence, and Leonardo found himself holding his breath. "All right," Mateus finally conceded, "but promise me you'll get some rest soon. And Laura, you know you can always talk to me, right? About anything." "I know," Laura replied, her voice warm with affection. "Thank you, Mateus. You're a good friend." Leonardo stepped back, his mind reeling. He'd been so focused on Laura's potential interest in the Montero fortune that he'd never considered she might be struggling financially, and her refusal to ask Raphael for help. Was it pride or something else? As he drove home that night, Leonardo found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about Laura Alvarez. She was hard-working, dedicated, and fiercely independent. But was that enough to quell his doubts? The shadows of suspicion still lingered, but they were increasingly overshadowed by a growing respect for the young woman who seemed determined to make her own way in the world, no matter the cost. Leonardo realized with a start that he was no longer just observing Laura as a potential threat to his son and his legacy. He was beginning to see her as a person in her own right, complex, flawed, and ultimately very human. As he pulled into his driveway, Leonardo couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. The pieces of the puzzle were there, but they weren't fitting together the way he'd expected. Little did he know the true test was yet to come, and it would shake the very foundations of everything he thought he knew about Laura, Raphael, and himself. The summer session was halfway through, and the Berkeley campus hummed with the energy of students racing against time to complete their projects. In his borrowed office, Leonardo sat behind a desk cluttered with papers. His brother's glasses perched precariously on his nose as he reviewed the latest batch of student submissions. A knock on the door interrupted his concentration. "Come in," he called, expecting another student seeking guidance. To his surprise, it was Raphael who entered, his face a mask of careful neutrality. "Professor Montero, do you have a moment?" Leonardo's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained his composure. "Of course, Mr. Montero, please, have a seat." As Raphael settled into the chair across from him, Leonardo couldn't help but marvel at how much his son had grown. There was a newfound maturity in his eyes, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. "What can I do for you?" Leonardo asked, slipping fully into his role as Professor Carlos. Raphael leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I wanted to discuss the ethical implications of deception in business practices. Specifically, when someone in a position of power uses subterfuge to gather information about their employees or family members." Leonardo felt the blood drain from his face. Could Raphael know? Had he somehow seen through the disguise? He forced himself to remain calm, adopting a thoughtful expression. "An interesting topic. What particular aspect of this issue interests you?" "Let's say," Raphael began, his voice carefully controlled, "a CEO suspects one of his employees of having ulterior motives. Instead of confronting them directly, he creates an elaborate ruse to observe them without their knowledge. Is this ethical?" Leonardo's mind raced. This was too specific to be coincidental. He chose his words carefully. "That's a complex scenario. On one hand, the CEO has a responsibility to protect the company's interests. On the other, such deception could be seen as a breach of trust and potentially illegal." Raphael nodded, his expression unreadable. And what if the employee in question was actually a family member? Does that change the ethical calculus? Leonardo felt a bead of sweat form on his brow. Family dynamics certainly complicate matters. In such a case, one could argue that open communication would be a more appropriate— "Cut the act, Dad," Raphael interrupted, his calm facade finally cracking. "I know it's you." The silence that followed was deafening. Leonardo stared at his son, a mix of shock and shame washing over him. How long have you known?" Raphael leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Since the first day of class. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize my own father?" Leonardo removed the glasses, rubbing his eyes tiredly. "I underestimated you, it seems." "Raphael, I can explain—" "Save it," Raphael cut him off. "I don't need your explanations. What I need is for you to understand how your actions affect others. Do you have any idea how it feels to watch your father masquerade as someone else, all to spy on the woman I love?" The pain in Raphael's voice was palpable, and Leonardo felt a wave of guilt wash over him. "I was trying to protect you," he said weakly. Raphael scoffed. "Protect me from what? From Laura? The hardest working, most ethical person I know? I had concerns." "Concerns?" Raphael's voice rose. "If you had concerns, you could have talked to me, to Laura. Instead, you concocted this elaborate scheme. Do you not trust me to make my own decisions?" Leonardo stood, moving around the desk to face his son directly. "Of course I trust you, Raphael. It's just, I've seen people taken advantage of before. I couldn't bear the thought of that happening to you." Raphael's anger seemed to deflate slightly, replaced by a weary sadness. "Dad, I'm not a child anymore. I'm capable of choosing who to let into my life. And Laura, she's incredible. If you'd taken the time to get to know her as yourself, instead of this Professor Carlos charade, you'd see that." Leonardo sank back against the desk, the weight of his actions finally hitting him. "You're right. I've made a terrible mistake. I let my fears cloud my judgment." "It's not just me you've hurt," Raphael said quietly. "What about Uncle Leandro? You've put his entire career at risk with this stunt." The mention of his brother sent another pang of guilt through Leonardo. "I'll make it right," he promised. "Somehow, I'll fix this." Raphael stood, shaking his head. "It's not that simple, Dad. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired." He moved towards the door, then paused, turning back. "For what it's worth, I understand why you did it. You were trying to protect me in your own misguided way. But this ends now. No more deceptions, no more schemes." As Raphael reached for the doorknob, Leonardo called out, "Wait, what? What are you going to tell Laura?" Raphael's hand stilled on the door. Without turning around, he said, "The truth, all of it. She deserves to know." With that he left, leaving Leonardo alone in the borrowed office, surrounded by the remnants of his ill-conceived plan. As the door clicked shut, Leonardo slumped into his chair, his head in his hands. He had started this charade to protect his son, to safeguard his legacy. Instead, he had very nearly destroyed the thing he valued most, his relationship with Raphael. The irony wasn't lost on him. In his quest to uncover the truth about Laura, he had been forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about himself. As the afternoon sun slanted through the office windows, Leonardo Montero, titan of industry and self-made billionaire, felt utterly lost. He had navigated countless business crises, but this, repairing the damage he had done to his family, would be his greatest challenge yet. And somewhere on campus, Raphael was preparing to tell Laura the truth. Leonardo could only imagine how she would react. Would she be angry, hurt? Would she ever be able to forgive him? For the first time in years, Leonardo Montero found himself facing a future he couldn't predict or control, and it terrified him. The Berkeley Rose Garden was a riot of color and fragrance, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Laura Alvarez's mind. She sat on a bench, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, trying to process the bombshell Raphael had just dropped on her. "So let me get this straight," she said, her voice remarkably steady given the circumstances. "Professor Carlos is actually your father, Leonardo Montero, in disguise, and he's been pretending to be his own twin brother this entire time, to spy on me." Raphael nodded, his face a mask of shame and regret. "I'm so sorry, Laura. I should have told you sooner. I couldn't believe he'd go this far. I kept hoping he'd come to his senses." Laura stood abruptly, pacing in front of the bench. Her mind was reeling, replaying every interaction she'd had with Professor Carlos over the past few weeks. The probing questions, the scrutiny, the way he always seemed to be watching her. It all made a twisted kind of sense now. "I can't believe this," she muttered. "All this time, I've been pouring my heart out in those ethics discussions, thinking I was impressing a respected professor. And it was all just a test? A way to see if I was good enough for the great Montero family?" Raphael reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "It wasn't like that, Laura. My father, he has trust issues. He convinced himself you might be after our family's money. He thought he was protecting me." Laura whirled to face him, her eyes flashing. "And you? What did you think, Raphael? Did you believe I was some kind of gold digger too?" "Of course not," Raphael exclaimed, standing to face her. "I know you, Laura. I know your heart. That's why I went along with this ridiculous charade at first. I thought if my father got to know you, even under false pretenses, he'd see what I see." Laura's anger deflated slightly, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. "I've worked so hard, Raphael. 2 jobs, countless all-nighters, sacrificing everything to prove that I belong here. And all this time your father was just waiting for me to slip up, to reveal some hidden agenda." Raphael stepped closer, gently taking her hands in his. This time she didn't pull away. "I know, Laura, and I'm so sorry. What my father did was wrong, but please don't let his actions change how you see yourself. You belong here. You've earned your place fair and square." Laura looked up at him, tears shimmering in her eyes. "How can I face him now, Raphael? How can I sit in that classroom knowing that every word I say, every action I take, is being judged not by a professor, but by my boyfriend's father?" Raphael pulled her into a tight embrace. "You won't have to. This ends now. I've already told him to drop the act. No more deceptions, no more games." As they stood there, surrounded by the sweet scent of roses, a figure appeared on the path. Leonardo Montero, still dressed in his professor's attire, but with his own bearing and demeanor, approached slowly. Laura stiffened in Raphael's arms. "What is he doing here?" Raphael turned, keeping one arm protectively around Laura. "Dad? What are you doing?" Leonardo stopped a few feet away, his face a mixture of shame and determination. "I came to apologize," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "To both of you." Laura stepped forward, her chin held high despite the tear tracks on her cheeks. "With all due respect, Mr. Montero, I'm not sure I'm ready to hear your apology." Leonardo nodded, accepting her words. "I understand. And I don't expect forgiveness, Ms. Alvarez, but I owe you an explanation and a promise." He took a deep breath, visibly steeling himself. "I've spent my life building an empire, protecting it from those who would take advantage. Somewhere along the way I lost sight of what truly matters. I convinced myself that my actions were justified, that I was protecting my son and my legacy. But in reality I was only protecting my own fears and insecurities." Laura and Raphael exchanged a glance but remained silent, allowing Leonardo to continue. "What I've seen over these past weeks, it's opened my eyes. Ms. Alvarez, you are not at all what I feared. You're intelligent, hardworking, and possess an ethical compass that, quite frankly, puts mine to shame. I came here to test you, but in the end it was I who failed the test." Leonardo's voice cracked slightly, and for the first time Laura saw vulnerability in the titan of industry. "I promise you both, here and now, that I will make this right. I'll face the consequences of my actions, whatever they may be, and I'll spend however long it takes rebuilding the trust I've broken." The garden fell silent save for the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Laura felt Raphael squeeze her hand supportively, but her eyes remained fixed on Leonardo. Finally she spoke. "Mr. Montero, I won't pretend that what you did doesn't hurt. It does. You violated my trust, my privacy, and my right to be judged on my own merits, but—" She paused, taking a deep breath. "But I also believe in second chances. It's what this whole course was supposed to be about, wasn't it? Ethics, redemption, making the right choice even when it's difficult." Leonardo nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "So here's what's going to happen," Laura continued, her voice gaining strength. "You're going to come clean to the university. You're going to make sure your brother's reputation isn't damaged by your actions. And then you're going to sit down with me as yourself this time, and we're going to have a long, honest conversation about trust, respect, and family. Raphael looked at Laura in awe, while Leonardo seemed to stand a little straighter, nodding solemnly. "I give you my word, Ms. Alvarez. I'll do all of that and more." As the three of them stood there in the Berkeley Rose Garden, surrounded by the beauty of nature, a fragile new understanding began to take root. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, there was hope that something stronger, more genuine, could grow from the ashes of deception. Leonardo Montero had come to Berkeley to unmask what he thought was a threat to his family. Instead, he found himself stripped of his own masks, forced to confront the man he had become and the man he wanted to be. As they left the garden together, the sweet scent of roses lingering in the air, all three knew that this was not an ending, but a beginning. A chance to rebuild, to understand, and perhaps to forge a bond stronger than any of them had dared to hope for. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Berkeley campus as Leonardo Montero stood before the dean of the business school, his posture rigid with tension. The ornate office, with its dark wood paneling and shelves lined with leather-bound books, felt oppressive, a fitting backdrop for the difficult conversation at hand. "Let me see if I understand this correctly, Mr. Montero," Dean Harrison said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You impersonated your brother, a respected member of our faculty, for nearly half a semester, all to, what? Spy on your son's girlfriend?" Leonardo winced at the harsh summation but nodded. "Yes, Dean Harrison, I know it sounds, well, there's no excuse for my behavior. I'm here to take full responsibility for my actions." The dean leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowed. "Do you have any idea of the potential ramifications of this? The breach of ethics, the violation of student privacy, the damage to our institution's reputation if this were to become public?" "I do," Leonardo replied, his voice heavy with regret. "And I'm prepared to face whatever consequences you deem appropriate. But I beg you to ensure that my brother Leandro doesn't suffer for my mistakes." He was an unwilling participant in this charade. Dean Harrison's expression softened slightly. "Professor Leandro Montero's reputation and position are not in jeopardy. He came to me as soon as he realized the full extent of what was happening. His ethical conduct in this matter is beyond reproach." Leonardo felt a rush of relief, quickly followed by a pang of shame. Of course, Leandro had done the right thing. He always did. "As for you, Mr. Montero," the dean continued, "while I appreciate your coming forward, the severity of this breach cannot be overstated. We will need to conduct a full review of all the grades and assessments you issued during your tenure, and there will need to be a formal apology to the students affected." Leonardo nodded, accepting each point without protest. "Furthermore," Dean Harrison added, her tone growing stern once more, "I believe it would be appropriate for you to make a substantial donation to our ethics department, perhaps funding a series of lectures on the importance of transparency and integrity in business practices." Despite the gravity of the situation, Leonardo couldn't help but admire the dean's shrewd negotiation. "Of course," he agreed. "I'll have my office draw up the paperwork immediately." As he left the dean's office an hour later, Leonardo felt as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The road to redemption would be long and difficult, but at least now he was walking it openly, without pretense or deception. His next stop was a small cafe just off campus, where Laura had agreed to meet him. As he approached, he saw her sitting at an outdoor table, her posture tense, eyes watchful. She didn't smile as he sat down across from her. "Thank you for agreeing to see me, Ms. Alvarez," Leonardo began, his usual confidence notably absent. Laura nodded curtly. "I'm here because Raphael asked me to give you a chance, but let me be clear, Mr. Montero. I'm not here for pleasantries or empty apologies. I want answers." Leonardo took a deep breath, steeling himself. "Of course. Ask me anything. I promise to answer with complete honesty." Laura leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Why? Why go to such extreme lengths? Did you really think I was some sort of con artist?" "The truth is," Leonardo began, choosing his words carefully, "my suspicions had less to do with you specifically and more to do with my own past experiences. Years ago, I was involved with someone who was only interested in my wealth. It left me scarred, distrustful. When Raphael started talking about you, about how perfect you seemed, those old fears resurfaced." Laura's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. That explains your suspicions, Mr. Montero. It doesn't excuse your actions. You're absolutely right, Leonardo agreed. Nothing excuses what I did. I let my fears override my judgment, my ethics, everything I claim to stand for. I became so focused on protecting Raphael that I couldn't see how my actions were hurting him. And you. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled only by the gentle clinking of cups and the murmur of nearby conversations. Finally, Laura spoke again. You know, the irony in all this is that if you had just talked to me, to us, openly, you would have learned everything you wanted to know about my background, my goals, my feelings for Raphael. Leonardo nodded, a rueful smile tugging at his lips. I'm beginning to realize that open communication might have saved us all a lot of trouble. It's not too late to start, Laura said, her tone softening further. So, Mr. Montero, why don't we begin again? Ask me what you want to know. No disguises, no games. Just two people talking. And so, as the afternoon faded into evening, Leonardo Montero and Laura Alvarez began to truly know each other. They talked of Laura's childhood in a working-class neighborhood, of her determination to succeed against the odds, of her dreams for the future. Leonardo shared stories of his own humble beginnings, the struggles he faced building his empire, and the fears that still haunted him despite his success. As their conversation drew to a close, Leonardo felt a newfound respect for the young woman sitting across from him. Her strength, her integrity, her unwavering commitment to her goals, these were qualities he had once prided himself on, qualities he hoped to reclaim. Ms. Alvarez, Laura, he said as they stood to leave, I want you to know that I see now how wrong I was, not just in my actions, but in my assumptions. You are an extraordinary young woman, and Raphael is lucky to have you in his life. Laura smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes for the first time. Thank you, Mr. Montero. I appreciate that. And I hope that moving forward, we can build a relationship based on mutual respect and trust. As they parted ways, Leonardo felt a glimmer of hope. The damage he had done was far from repaired, but this conversation was a start, a foundation upon which perhaps a stronger, more genuine connection could be built. Little did he know, the true test of this newfound understanding was yet to come. For as the sun set over Berkeley, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink, events were unfolding that would challenge everything Leonardo thought he knew about family, loyalty, and the true nature of ethical behavior. The following week brought a flurry of activity to the Berkeley campus. News of Leonardo Montero's deception had spread like wildfire, despite the administration's best efforts to contain it. Students whispered in hallways, professors huddled in concerned groups, and the air buzzed with a mixture of shock, outrage, and morbid fascination. In the eye of this storm stood Laura Alvarez, her head held high despite the curious glances and not-so-subtle pointing. She had just finished her last class of the day and was heading towards the library when a familiar voice called out to her. Laura, wait up! She turned to see Mateus jogging towards her, his face etched with concern. Hey, she greeted him with a tired smile. What's up? Mateus fell into step beside her, his voice low. I just heard about what happened. The whole Professor Carlos thing. Are you okay? Laura sighed, running a hand through her hair. I'm managing. It's been a lot to process. I can't even imagine. Mateus shook his head in disbelief. I mean, we spent weeks working on that project together, pouring our hearts out in those ethics discussions, and the whole time it was, I don't even know what to call it. A violation of trust, Laura supplied, her tone sharp. A gross overstepping of boundaries. Take your pick. They walked in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation hanging heavy between them. Finally, Mateus spoke again, his voice hesitant. Laura, there's something I need to tell you. Something I probably should have said a long time ago. Laura stopped, turning to face him fully. What is it, Mateus? He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers with a mixture of guilt and determination. I had feelings for you. Romantic feelings. For a long time, actually. Laura's eyes widened in surprise. Mateus, He held up a hand, cutting her off gently. Please let me finish. I had these feelings, and there were times when I thought about acting on them. But I saw how happy you were with Raphael, how good you were together. So I decided to be the best friend I could be instead. Laura stood there, stunned. Of all the revelations she'd faced in the past week, this one blindsided her completely. Mateus continued, his voice growing stronger. I'm telling you this now because I want you to understand something. Mr. Montero wasn't entirely wrong to be concerned about people's intentions towards you and Raphael. There are always those who might try to take advantage, but he was wrong about you, Laura. And he was wrong about how to handle his concerns. Laura felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. Mateus, I had no idea. I'm so sorry if I ever... No, Mateus interrupted, a small smile on his face. You have nothing to apologize for. You were always honest, always true to yourself and to Raphael. That's why I'm here now, offering my support, because I've seen firsthand the kind of person you are, Laura. And I think it's time everyone else saw it too. Laura blinked, confused. What do you mean? Mateus's smile widened. I mean, I have an idea. A way to turn this whole mess into something positive, but I'm going to need your help. And Raphael, and believe it or not, Mr. Montero's too. As Mateus outlined his plan, Laura felt a spark of excitement ignite within her. It was bold, potentially risky, but if it worked... Are you sure about this? She asked when he finished explaining. It's a lot to take on, especially with finals coming up. Mateus nodded, his eyes shining with determination. I'm sure. This is bigger than grades or academic recognition. This is about standing up for what's right, about turning a negative experience into a force for positive change. Isn't that what we've been learning about all semester? Laura felt a rush of affection for her friend. Despite his personal feelings, despite the potential for awkwardness or hurt, here he was, standing by her side, ready to fight not just for her, but for something greater. Okay, she said, a genuine smile spreading across her face for the first time in days. Let's do it, but first we need to talk to Raphael and Mr. Montero. This only works if everyone's on board. As they set off across campus, a new energy in their steps, Laura couldn't help but marvel at the unexpected turns life could take. A week ago, she had felt betrayed, angry, unsure of her place in the world. Now, she was embarking on a project that could potentially change the face of business ethics education at Berkeley and beyond. The sun was setting as they reached Raphael's apartment, casting a warm glow over the campus. As Laura knocked on the door, Mateus by her side, she felt a surge of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wasn't facing them alone. Little did Laura and Mateus know their conversation had not gone unnoticed. In the shadows of a nearby building, a figure had been watching, listening. As the two friends disappeared into Raphael's apartment, the observer pulled out a phone, fingers flying over the keys. The message was brief. It's happening. They're making their move. What are your orders? The response came almost immediately. Watch and wait. Report any developments. Do not intervene unless absolutely necessary. As night fell over Berkeley, the pieces of a much larger game were slowly falling into place. A game that would test the limits of trust, ethics, and the bonds of family and friendship. And at the center of it all, unknowingly, stood Laura Alvarez, Raphael Montero, and the unlikely alliance they were about to forge. The living room of Raphael's apartment buzzed with nervous energy as Laura and Mateus finished outlining their plan. Raphael paced back and forth, running a hand through his hair, while Leonardo sat in an armchair, his expression unreadable. Let me get this straight, Raphael said, pausing in his pacing. You want to turn this whole fiasco into a case study on business ethics? And you want all of us to participate? Laura nodded, her eyes bright with determination. Exactly. We take what happened, the deception, the consequences, the lessons learned, and we turn it into a teaching tool, something that can help future business leaders understand the real-world implications of ethical decision-making. Leonardo leaned forward, his brow furrowed. And you want me to be a part of this? To publicly admit to my mistakes? Yes, Mr. Montero, Mateus chimed in. Your perspective is crucial. This isn't about public shaming or punishment. It's about learning, growth, and redemption. A heavy silence fell over the room as Leonardo considered the proposal. Finally he spoke, his voice tinged with a mixture of resignation and respect. You know, when I started this ill-conceived plan, I thought I was protecting my family and my legacy. I never imagined it would lead to this. He stood up, pacing slowly. A case study on ethics, using my own failures as the centerpiece. It's audacious, I'll give you that. He turned to face the group, a glimmer of his old confidence returning. But if there's one thing I've learned in business, It's that sometimes the boldest moves yield the greatest rewards. Raphael stepped closer to his father, hope dawning in his eyes. "Dad, are you saying—" Leonardo nodded, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "I'm saying yes. If I'm going to face the consequences of my actions, I might as well do it in a way that can benefit others. Besides," he added, glancing at Laura with newfound respect, "I think it's high time I started listening to the younger generation. You might just teach this old dog some new tricks." The tension in the room dissipated, replaced by a cautious optimism. Laura and Mateus exchanged excited glances, while Raphael moved to stand beside his father, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. "All right," Laura said, her voice filled with renewed energy. "If we're all in agreement, here's what we need to do next." As the group huddled together, hammering out the details of their ambitious plan, none of them noticed the faint shadow that passed by the window. Outside, a figure melted into the darkness, phone already in hand. The next morning, the Berkeley campus was abuzz with activity. Students hurried to classes, professors gathered for meetings, and amidst it all, a small group made their way towards the business school administration building. Laura led the way, her stride purposeful, with Raphael and Mateus flanking her on either side. Behind them walked Leonardo Montero, looking somewhat out of place in the academic setting without his Professor Carlos disguise. As they approached the building, Dean Harrison emerged, her expression a mixture of surprise and wariness. "Mr. Montero," she greeted, her gaze shifting between Leonardo and the students. "I wasn't expecting to see you back on campus so soon. And with company." Leonardo stepped forward, his demeanor respectful but determined. "Dean Harrison, we have a proposal we'd like to discuss with you. One that I believe could turn recent, unfortunate events into a valuable learning opportunity for the entire business school." The dean's eyebrows rose skeptically, but she nodded. "Very well. Let's take this to my office." As the group filed into the building, Laura couldn't help but feel a flutter of nerves. This was it. The moment that could either vindicate their efforts or dash their hopes entirely. Inside the dean's office, Laura took the lead, outlining their proposal with passion and precision. She explained how they wanted to develop a comprehensive case study based on recent events, exploring the ethical implications, the decision-making processes, and the far-reaching consequences of actions taken in the business world. "We believe this could be an invaluable teaching tool," Laura concluded. "A real-world example that goes beyond textbook scenarios, showing students the true complexity of ethical dilemmas in business." Dean Harrison listened intently, her expression thoughtful. When Laura finished, she turned to Leonardo. "And you, Mr. Montero, you're willing to participate in this exposé of your actions?" Leonardo nodded solemnly. "I am, Dean Harrison. I've come to realize that true leadership means owning up to one's mistakes and using them as opportunities for growth, not just for oneself, but for others as well." The dean leaned back in her chair, considering. The silence stretched on, tension building in the room. Finally she spoke. "It's an ambitious proposal, I'll give you that. And not without risk." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the group. "But then again, the greatest advancements in education often come from taking calculated risks." Laura felt her heart leap as a smile spread across the dean's face. "All right," Dean Harrison said, sitting up straighter. "You have my provisional approval, but I want to be involved every step of the way. We'll need to establish clear guidelines, ensure all parties are protected, and make sure this case study meets the highest academic standards." The room erupted in relieved smiles and excited murmurs. As they began to discuss the next steps, Laura caught Raphael's eye, sharing a moment of triumph. They had done it. They had taken a painful, divisive situation and turned it into an opportunity for growth and learning. As the meeting wrapped up and they prepared to leave, Dean Harrison called out, "Oh, and Ms. Alvarez?" Laura turned, curious. "Yes, Dean Harrison?" The older woman's eyes twinkled with approval. "Excellent work. You've shown remarkable leadership and initiative. I think you have a bright future ahead of you in the world of business ethics." Laura felt a warmth spread through her chest at the praise. As they left the office, she realized that this project was more than just a way to make amends or prove a point. It was the beginning of something bigger, a chance to make a real difference in how future business leaders approached ethical decision-making. Little did they know as they walked out into the sunlight, filled with hope and determination, that their actions had set in motion a chain of events that would reach far beyond the walls of Berkeley. For in the shadows, watching and waiting, were those who saw this new development not as an opportunity for redemption, but as a threat to be eliminated at all costs. The game was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Berkeley campus, a solitary figure made their way through the darkening pathways. The hood of their jacket was pulled low, obscuring their face from the few students still milling about. The figure paused near the business school, glancing around furtively before slipping into a secluded alcove. Only then did they pull out a phone, fingers flying over the keys as they composed a message. Project approved by Dean. Montero fully on board. Alvarez leading the charge. This could expose everything. The response came almost immediately. Understood. Initiate containment protocol. Use any means necessary but maintain deniability. We cannot afford for this to see the light of day. The figure pocketed the phone, a grim determination settling over them. As they melted back into the shadows, the weight of their mission hung heavy in the air. Across campus, in the cozy confines of a bustling coffee shop, Laura, Raphael, Mateus, and Leonardo were celebrating their successful meeting with Dean Harrison. The atmosphere was light, a stark contrast to the tension that had defined their interactions in recent weeks. "I still can't believe we pulled it off," Raphael said, shaking his head in amazement. "Laura, that presentation was incredible. You had the dean eating out of your hand." Laura blushed slightly at the praise. "It was a team effort. We all played our part." Leonardo nodded, raising his coffee cup in a mock toast. "Indeed, and I must say, I'm impressed with how you've handled this situation, Ms. Alvarez. You've shown remarkable grace under pressure." As the group continued to chat and plan their next steps, none of them noticed the barista behind the counter, her eyes darting frequently in their direction as she pretended to wipe down the already spotless countertop. The next morning, Laura arrived at her first class to find a flurry of whispers and pointed looks. As she made her way to her seat, she caught snippets of conversation that made her blood run cold. "Did you hear? She's the one using the Montero scandal to further her own career. Probably planned the whole thing." Laura's heart raced as she tried to make sense of the sudden shift in atmosphere. It wasn't until she checked her phone during a break that she understood the source of the gossip. There, splashed across the top student news site, was a headline that made her stomach drop. "Ethical breach or calculated move. Questions arise about motivations behind Montero case study." The article, written by an anonymous source, insinuated that Laura had orchestrated the entire situation, from Leonardo's initial suspicions to the proposed case study, as a way to gain favor with the administration and advance her own career. Laura's hands shook as she scrolled through the article, each word feeling like a personal attack. How could anyone think she would do something like this? And more importantly, where had these accusations come from? As she hurried out of class, her mind reeling, she nearly collided with Mateus, who wore an equally troubled expression. "Laura, have you seen the article?" "Yeah," she cut him off, her voice tight with emotion. "Mateus, what's going on? Who would write something like this?" Mateus shook his head, his brow furrowed with concern. "I don't know, but it's not just the article. There are rumors spreading all over campus. Someone's really trying to discredit you and the project." Laura leaned against the wall, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. "But why? We're trying to do something good here, something that could really make a difference. Maybe that's exactly why," Mateus mused, his voice low. "Think about it, Laura. This case study, it's not just about Leonardo Montero's actions. It's about ethics in the entire business world. Who knows what other skeletons might come tumbling out of closets if people start really examining their ethical practices." Laura's eyes widened as the implications sank in. "You think someone's trying to stop us? But who would have that kind of power, that kind of reach?" Before Mateus could respond, Laura's phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Raphael. "Laura, are you okay?" His voice was filled with concern. "I just saw the article. It's complete nonsense, of course, but—" "I'm fine," Laura assured him, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "But Raphael, I think there's more going on here than just some malicious gossip. Can you meet us? We need to talk." As Laura hung up, she caught sight of a figure watching her from the end of the hallway, but when she blinked, they were gone, leaving her to wonder if the stress was making her paranoid. Little did she know, the figure was very real, and their presence marked the beginning of a dangerous game of cat and mouse. For as Laura and her friends worked to bring truth and transparency to the world of business ethics, there were those who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. The shadows were closing in, whispers turning to threats, and Laura found herself at the center of a storm she never saw coming. But as she squared her shoulders and set off to meet Raphael, there was a fire in her eyes that spoke of determination. She had faced doubts and overcome them before. She would do so again. For Laura Alvarez, this was no longer just about clearing her name or even about the case study. This was about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. And she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. As she walked across campus, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. But instead of fear, she felt a surge of resolve. Whatever forces were aligning against them, she knew one thing for certain: the truth would come to light. It had to. The sun had long since set over Berkeley, when Laura, Raphael, Mateus, and Leonardo gathered in the dimly lit corner of a quiet off-campus cafe. The day's events had left them all shaken, and the weight of unspoken concerns hung heavy in the air. Laura sat with her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea, her eyes distant. "I just don't understand," she said, breaking the tense silence. "Who would go to such lengths to discredit us, and why?" Raphael reached out, placing a comforting hand over hers. "We'll figure it out, Laura. Whoever's behind this, they don't know who they're messing with." Leonardo, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "I'm afraid I might have an idea of who's behind this," he said, his voice grave. "And if I'm right, we're dealing with something much bigger than we anticipated." All eyes turned to him, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension on their faces. "Years ago," Leonardo began, leaning in and lowering his voice, "I was involved in a business deal with a group of investors. It was a lucrative opportunity, but as we got deeper into negotiations, I began to suspect that not everything was above board." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee before continuing. "I started asking questions, digging into the backgrounds of some of the key players. That's when things got complicated. I received warnings, veiled threats. It became clear that these people had connections in high places and weren't afraid to use them." Mateus's eyes widened. "What did you do?" "I walked away from the deal," Leonardo replied, a hint of regret in his voice. "I told myself it was the smart move, that I was protecting my family and my company. But the truth is, I was afraid. I chose self-preservation over doing what I knew was right." Laura leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "But what does this have to do with our situation now?" Leonardo's gaze met hers, his expression solemn. "Because, Ms. Alvarez, I believe these same people are behind the attempts to discredit you and stop our case study. You see, what you're proposing, a deep dive into real-world ethical dilemmas in business, it threatens to expose not just my mistakes, but potentially a whole network of questionable practices and deals." Raphael stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Dad, are you saying you've known about this conspiracy all along? And you didn't say anything?" Leonardo held up his hands placatingly. "I didn't know for certain, Raphael. I hoped I was wrong, that this was all just coincidence. But after today's events, I can't ignore the similarities." A heavy silence fell over the group as they processed this new information. Laura's mind raced, connecting dots she hadn't even realized were there. The anonymous article, the whispers on campus, the feeling of being watched, it all suddenly took on a more sinister light. Mateus was the first to break the silence. "So what do we do now? We can't just give up on the project." Laura straightened in her chair, a determined glint in her eye. "No, we can't. In fact, this only proves how important our work is. If there are people out there willing to go to such lengths to maintain the status quo, then it's even more crucial that we shine a light on these ethical issues." Raphael nodded, his initial anger giving way to resolve. "Laura's right. We started this to make a difference, to create real change in how business ethics are taught and practiced. We can't back down now." Leonardo looked at the three young faces before him, a mixture of pride and concern etched on his features. "I admire your determination, truly. But you need to understand the risks. These people, they have resources, influence. They won't hesitate to use every tool at their disposal to stop us. Laura met his gaze steadily. With all due respect, Mr. Montero, that's exactly why we need to keep going. If we back down now, they win and nothing changes. A slow smile spread across Leonardo's face. You know, Ms. Alvarez, I'm beginning to understand why my son is so taken with you. Very well. If we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it. We need a plan. As the group huddled closer, their voices low and intense, they began to formulate a strategy. They would need allies, evidence, and above all, a way to protect themselves from the unseen forces working against them. Outside the cafe, a figure lingered in the shadows, watching the animated discussion through the window. They pulled out a phone, fingers flying over the keys. Meeting in progress. Montero has joined their side, awaiting further instructions. The response came swiftly. Escalate. It's time to show them what they're really up against. As the figure melted back into the darkness, the four inside the cafe remained oblivious to the storm that was brewing. They had taken their first steps down a path that would challenge everything they thought they knew about power, ethics, and the true cost of doing the right thing. Little did they know. Their decision to press forward would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the foundations of the business world and test the limits of their courage, integrity, and trust in each other. The game had changed, and the stakes were higher than ever. But for Laura, Rafael, Mateus, and Leonardo, there was no turning back. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. The early morning mist still clung to the Berkeley campus as Laura made her way towards the business school. Despite the early hour, her mind was already racing, replaying the conversation from the previous night and mapping out their next moves. As she approached the building, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows, causing her to start. "Professor Leandro?" Laura exclaimed, recognizing Leonardo's twin brother. "What are you doing here so early?" Leandro Montero stepped forward, his face etched with concern. "Ms. Alvarez, I'm glad I caught you. We need to talk." Laura's guard immediately went up. After everything that had happened, she wasn't sure who to trust anymore. "About what, Professor?" Leandro glanced around furtively before speaking in a low voice. "I know about the case study you're working on and the complications you've been facing. I want to help." Laura studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deception. "Why?" "No offense, Professor, but your brother's actions are part of what we're investigating. Aren't you worried about how this might affect your reputation?" A wry smile tugged at Leandro's lips. "Ms. Alvarez, I've spent my entire career advocating for ethical business practices. If I turned my back on this opportunity to effect real change, just to protect my own reputation, what kind of hypocrite would that make me?" His words rang true, and Laura felt some of her suspicion melt away. "All right, Professor, what did you have in mind?" As Leandro outlined his ideas, Laura felt a glimmer of hope. With his insider knowledge of both academia and the business world, Leandro could be a powerful ally in their quest for truth. Their conversation was interrupted by the buzz of Laura's phone. It was a text from Mateus. "Emergency meeting, Dean's office, now." Laura's heart raced as she showed the message to Leandro. Without a word, they both hurried towards the administration building. When they arrived, they found Rafael and Mateus already waiting outside the Dean's office, their faces grim. "What's going on?" Laura asked, breathless from their quick pace. Before either could answer, the door opened and Dean Harrison emerged, her expression unreadable. "Ah, Ms. Alvarez, Professor Montero, good, you're here. Please, all of you, come in." As they filed into the office, Laura's eyes widened in surprise. Leonardo was already there, along with two people she didn't recognize, a stern-looking woman in a crisp suit and a younger man who seemed vaguely familiar. Dean Harrison closed the door behind them, her voice solemn as she made introductions. "Everyone, this is Ms. Victoria Hawthorne from the University Board of Regents and Mr. Jason Chen, a representative from the Ethics Committee of the National Business Association." Laura's mind reeled. The Board of Regents? The National Business Association? This was bigger than she had imagined. Ms. Hawthorne spoke first, her voice sharp. "We've called this meeting to address the situation surrounding your proposed case study. It has come to our attention that this project may be causing significant disruption to the academic environment." Mr. Chen nodded in agreement. "Moreover, There are concerns about the potential impact on the reputations of both the university and several prominent business figures. Laura felt her heart sink. This was it. They were going to shut down the project before it even really began. But then, to everyone's surprise, Leonardo stepped forward. "If I may," he said, his voice steady, "I believe I can shed some light on why this project is not just important, but necessary." All eyes turned to him as he recounted the story he had shared with Laura and the others the night before, the shady deal he had walked away from, the veiled threats, the network of questionable practices that extended far beyond any one company or individual. As he spoke, Laura watched the faces of those around her. Dean Harrison looked shocked, Ms. Hawthorne skeptical, and Mr. Chen, was that a flicker of recognition in his eyes? When Leonardo finished, silence hung heavy in the room. It was Leandro who broke it, stepping forward to stand beside his brother. "I can vouch for the veracity of my brother's story," he said. "And I can attest to the integrity and importance of the work these students are doing." Dean Harrison turned to Laura, her expression thoughtful. "Ms. Alvarez, in light of this new information, what do you propose?" Laura took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "I propose that we move forward with the case study, but with expanded scope. This isn't just about one incident or one company anymore. It's about shining a light on systemic issues in business ethics, education, and practice." She turned to Ms. Hawthorne and Mr. Chen. "I understand your concerns about reputation and disruption, but isn't the purpose of education to challenge us, to make us uncomfortable sometimes? If we shy away from difficult truths, how can we ever hope to create real change?" The room fell silent again as her words sank in. Laura held her breath, acutely aware that everything they had worked for hung in the balance. Finally, Ms. Hawthorne spoke. "You make a compelling argument, Ms. Alvarez, but this project will need oversight, structure. It can't be allowed to devolve into a witch hunt or a sensationalized exposé." Mr. Chen nodded in agreement. "If we do this, it needs to be done right, with proper safeguards and peer review." Dean Harrison looked around the room, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Well, it seems we have our work cut out for us. Ms. Alvarez, Mr. Montero, Mr. Silva, are you prepared for the challenge ahead?" "This won't be easy." Laura exchanged glances with Raphael and Mateus, seeing her own determination mirrored in their eyes. "We are ready," she said firmly. As the meeting adjourned and people began to file out, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Outside the office, she overheard a snippet of conversation between Mr. Chen and Ms. Hawthorne. "Need to inform the others," Chen was saying in a low voice. "This could change everything." Hawthorne's response was too quiet to make out, but the serious look on her face sent a chill down Laura's spine. As she walked out into the sunlight, Laura's mind raced with questions. Who were the others? What exactly could change everything? And most importantly, now that they had official backing for their project, what forces might align against them? One thing was certain: the path ahead was fraught with challenges and unknown dangers. But as Laura looked at the determined faces of her friends and newfound allies, she felt a surge of hope. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The real work was just beginning, and Laura Alvarez was ready to change the world of business ethics, one hard truth at a time. The following weeks saw a flurry of activity as Laura, Raphael, and Mateus dove headfirst into their expanded case study. The business school buzzed with a newfound energy, as students and faculty alike became caught up in the project's momentum. Laura found herself at the center of it all, coordinating interviews, analyzing data, and piecing together a complex web of connections that stretched far beyond the walls of Berkeley. Late one evening, as she pored over a stack of financial reports in the library, she felt a presence behind her. "Burning the midnight oil, Ms. Alvarez?" Laura turned to find Jason Chen, the representative from the National Business Association, standing there with an enigmatic smile. "Mr. Chen," she greeted, trying to mask her surprise. "I didn't realize you were still on campus." He shrugged, pulling up a chair. "I've been assigned to oversee the project. Thought I'd check in on your progress." As they discussed the case study, Laura couldn't shake a nagging feeling that there was more to Chen's interest than mere oversight. His questions were probing, his knowledge of certain business dealings surprisingly detailed. "You know," Chen said casually as he stood to leave, "you might want to look into the Meridian Group. They have..." Interesting connections to some of the companies you're investigating. Laura's eyes narrowed. The Meridian Group. I haven't come across them in my research. Chen's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. No, I don't suppose you would have. Good night, Ms. Alvarez. Do be careful on your way home. It's dark out there. As he walked away, Laura felt a chill run down her spine. Was that friendly advice or a veiled threat? The next day, Laura shared her encounter with Rafael and Mateus over lunch. I don't trust him, Rafael said, his voice low. Something about Chen just feels off. Mateus nodded in agreement. And this Meridian Group he mentioned? I did some digging. They're like ghosts. No public records, no online presence. It's like they don't exist. Laura leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. Or they don't want to be found. Guys, I think we're onto something big here. But we need to be careful. If Chen is involved somehow... Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Leonardo and Leandro Montero. The brothers had become invaluable allies in the project, their combined knowledge of business and academia providing crucial insights. We may have a problem, Leonardo said without preamble, sliding into a seat. There's been some pushback from certain quarters. People are getting nervous about what your investigation might uncover. Leandro nodded gravely. We've received some thinly veiled warnings. Nothing explicit, but the message is clear. There are powerful people who want this project shut down. Laura felt a mixture of fear and determination course through her. All the more reason to keep going, she said firmly. We're close to something, I can feel it. As the group discussed their next steps, none of them noticed the figure watching from across the cafeteria, phone in hand. Later that afternoon, Laura found herself in Dean Harrison's office, presenting their latest findings. The dean listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. This is explosive stuff, Ms. Alvarez, she said when Laura finished. If even half of what you're suggesting is true, it could reshape the entire landscape of business ethics education. Laura nodded, her voice passionate. That's exactly why we need to see this through, Dean Harrison. This isn't just about one company or one ethical lapse. It's about systemic issues that have been ignored for far too long. The dean studied Laura for a long moment before speaking. You remind me of myself at your age, you know. That same fire, that determination to change the world. She sighed, a hint of sadness in her eyes. Just be prepared, Laura. The higher you climb, the harder they'll try to knock you down. As Laura left the office, her mind whirling with everything they'd uncovered and everything still left to do, she nearly collided with a tall, distinguished-looking man she didn't recognize. Oh, I'm so sorry, she apologized, steadying herself. The man smiled, but there was something cold in his eyes. No harm done, my dear. You must be Laura Alvarez. I've heard so much about you. Laura's guard immediately went up. I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage, Mr. Blackwood, he supplied smoothly. Ethan Blackwood. I'm an old friend of the Montero family. I understand you've been working closely with Leonardo on a rather interesting project. Warning bells went off in Laura's head. There was something about Blackwood's tone, the way he looked at her, that set her on edge. It's been an enlightening experience, she said carefully. Blackwood's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Oh, I'm sure it has. You know, Ms. Alvarez, you're making quite a name for yourself, but fame can be a double-edged sword. I do hope you're prepared for the attention you're attracting. Before Laura could respond, Blackwood excused himself, leaving her standing in the hallway with a growing sense of unease. As she walked across campus, her mind racing with new questions and theories, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something much bigger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Little did she know, the true test of her courage and convictions was just around the corner. For in the shadows, forces were aligning, ready to strike at the very heart of everything she and her friends had worked so hard to build. The game was changing, the stakes rising, and Laura Alvarez was about to discover just how far some people would go to keep their secrets buried. The Berkeley campus was a hive of activity as students rushed to their final exams. Amidst the chaos, Laura, Rafael and Mateus huddled in a quiet corner of the library, their voices low and urgent. Are you sure about this, Laura? Rafael asked, concern etched on his face. If what you're saying is true, Laura nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. I'm sure. The connection between the Meridian Group and the companies we've been investigating, it's all there. And Ethan Blackwood is at the center of it. Mateus leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. But how do we prove it? These people, they're masters at covering their tracks. Before Laura could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Parking garage, level B2, 30 minutes. Come alone if you want the truth. The three exchanged wary glances. It could be a trap, Raphael said, squeezing Laura's hand. Or it could be the break we've been waiting for, she countered. I have to go. Despite their protests, Laura made her way to the parking garage, her heart pounding with each step. As she reached level B2, a figure emerged from the shadows. Jason Chen, Laura gasped, recognizing the man from the ethics committee. Chen's face was grim. Ms. Alvarez, listen carefully. We don't have much time. What you've uncovered, it goes deeper than you can imagine. The Meridian Group is just the tip of the iceberg. He handed her a flash drive. Everything you need is on here. Financial records, emails, proof of a network of corruption that reaches the highest levels of business and government. Laura's mind reeled. But why are you helping us? You thought I was one of them. Chen smiled sadly. I was once, but I can't be part of it anymore. What they're doing, it's destroying lives, Ms. Alvarez. Someone has to stop them. Suddenly, the screech of tires echoed through the garage. Chen's eyes widened in fear. They found us. You need to go now. Get that information to someone you trust. And Laura, you be careful. They'll stop at nothing to keep this quiet. As Laura sprinted towards the exit, she heard shouts and the sound of running feet behind her. Her heart pounded in her ears as she burst out into the sunlight, not daring to look back. She ran across campus, clutching the flash drive like a lifeline. She needed to find Raphael and Mateus, needed to get this information somewhere safe. As she rounded a corner, she nearly collided with Leonardo Montero. Laura? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost, Leonardo exclaimed, steadying her. Between gasps for air, Laura explained what had happened. Leonardo's face grew grave as he listened. Oh, we need to get you somewhere safe, he said, guiding her towards his car. I have a place where we can review this information without prying eyes. As they drove away from campus, Laura's phone exploded with messages from Raphael and Mateus, worried about her whereabouts. She quickly texted back, assuring them she was safe and with Leonardo. They arrived at a nondescript office building on the outskirts of town. Leonardo ushered her inside and into a secure room filled with computers and surveillance equipment. My private investigation room, he explained, noticing Laura's surprise. I've been conducting my own research into the Meridian Group. I had a feeling they were connected to the investors I walked away from years ago. As they began to comb through the files on the flash drive, the true scope of the conspiracy began to unfold before them. It was a web of corruption, bribery, and unethical practices that spanned continents and implicated some of the most powerful people in the business world. This is overwhelming, Laura said, her voice shaky. What do we do with all this? Leonardo's eyes were steely with resolve. We bring it to light, all of it, no matter the cost. Just then, Laura's phone rang. It was Raphael, his voice frantic. Laura, where are you? Something's happened. Men came to the campus. They were looking for you, Mateus. They took Mateus. Laura felt the blood drain from her face. What? Raphael, are you safe? I'm with my uncle Leandro. We're hiding. Laura, these people, they're serious. Whatever you found, it's big enough to scare them into action. Leonardo, having overheard the conversation, was already moving. We need to go, now. It's not safe here. As they rushed back to the car, Laura's mind was a whirlwind of fear and determination. Mateus was in danger. Raphael was in hiding. And somewhere out there, powerful forces were mobilizing against them. But they had the truth on their side now. Irrefutable evidence of a corruption so vast, it could shake the foundations of the business world. As Leonardo sped through the darkening streets, Laura made a silent vow. They would expose the truth no matter the cost. They would bring light to the shadows that had for too long corrupted the world of business ethics. The storm had broken, and Laura Alvarez found herself at its center. But she was no longer afraid. She was ready to fight, ready to stand up for what was right. Little did she know the greatest challenges and the most unexpected allies were yet to come. For in the world of high-stakes business and power, nothing is ever as it seems, and the line between friend and foe can blur in an instant. The endgame was approaching, and Laura was determined to see it through to the very end. The night air was thick with tension, as Leonardo's car sped through the streets of Berkeley. Laura sat in the passenger seat, her mind racing, the flash drive clutched tightly in her hand. The weight of its contents felt almost physical, a burden of truth that threatened to crush her. "We need a plan," Leonardo said, breaking the tense silence. "We can't just rush in blindly. These people, they're dangerous and well-connected." Laura nodded, forcing herself to think rationally despite the fear gripping her heart. "You're right, but we need to find Mateus first, and make sure Rafael and Leandro are safe." As if on cue, Laura's phone buzzed with a message from Rafael. "Safe house, 1742 Elm Street. Come quickly." Leonardo's eyebrows shot up as he read the address. "I know that place. It's one of Leandro's research facilities. Smart move." They arrived at an unassuming building on a quiet street. As they approached the door, it swung open, revealing a visibly shaken Rafael. He pulled Laura into a tight embrace before ushering them inside. The interior of the building was a stark contrast to its mundane exterior. Banks of computers lined the walls, and in the center of the room stood a large holographic display, currently showing a complex web of connections and data points. Leandro emerged from a side room, his face grim. "Glad you made it. We've got a situation on our hands." Over the next hour, they pieced together the events of the day. Mateus had been taken by men claiming to be federal agents, but Leandro's contacts in law enforcement had no record of any official operation. The Meridian Group's name kept surfacing, always on the periphery, but never directly implicated. "It's like they're ghosts," Rafael said frustratedly, gesturing at the holographic display. "Every time we think we've got a solid lead, it just evaporates." Laura stepped forward, holding up the flash drive. "Maybe this can help. It's what Chen gave me before everything went sideways." As Leandro began analyzing the data, a new message popped up on one of the screens. It was from an encrypted source, but the content made Laura's blood run cold. "We have your friend. Exchange all copies of the data for his safe return. You have 24 hours. Further instructions to follow." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They were in over their heads, facing an enemy with seemingly limitless resources and no scruples. It was Leonardo who finally broke the silence. "We need help. Professional help." Leandro nodded in agreement. "I have some contacts from my consulting days, people who specialize in delicate situations." As Leandro made calls, Laura and Rafael huddled together, drawing comfort from each other's presence. "We'll get him back," Rafael whispered, his voice filled with a determination that belied his own fears. "And we'll expose everything." Hours passed in a blur of activity. Leandro's contacts began to arrive. A diverse group of individuals with skills ranging from cybersecurity to corporate espionage. Among them was a familiar face that made Laura do a double-take. "Ms. Hawthorne," she exclaimed, recognizing the stern woman from the Board of Regents. Victoria Hawthorne's usually severe expression softened slightly. "Ms. Alvarez, it seems you've stirred up quite the hornet's nest. Good, it's about time someone did." As the team began to formulate a plan, Laura found herself in awe of the network of allies they had unknowingly built. People from all walks of life, united in their desire to see justice done and corruption exposed. "The key," Hawthorne explained, pointing to a node on the holographic display, "is to trace the money. The Meridian Group may be good at covering their tracks, but there's always a paper trail." A young woman with vibrant blue hair, introduced only as Pixel, cracked her knuckles as she sat before a bank of computers. "Leave the digital forensics to me. If there's a breadcrumb trail, I'll find it." As the night wore on, a plan began to take shape. They would use the data from Chen's flash drive as bait, setting up a fake exchange to draw out the kidnappers. Meanwhile, Pixel and her team would use the opportunity to infiltrate the Meridian Group's servers, gathering the final pieces of evidence they needed. It was a dangerous gambit, with Mateus's life hanging in the balance, but as Laura looked around the room at the determined faces of their newfound allies, she felt a glimmer of hope. Just before dawn, as the team made final preparations, Laura stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The weight of everything they were about to do pressed down on her, but she refused to buckle under the pressure. Raphael joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You okay?" Laura leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence. "I'm scared," she admitted, "but I'm also ready. We started this to make a difference, to change how ethics are taught and practiced in the business world. I never imagined it would lead us here, but I can't back down now." Raphael nodded, understanding in his eyes. "We're in this together, all of us. And no matter what happens, what you've done, what we've done, it matters. We've already changed things, Laura. People are talking, questioning, demanding better." As the first rays of sunlight began to peek over the horizon, Laura squared her shoulders. The day ahead would be one of the most challenging of her life, filled with danger and uncertainty. But she was no longer just a student or an idealist. She was a leader, standing at the forefront of a movement that had the potential to reshape the very foundations of business ethics. With Raphael by her side and a team of unlikely allies at their back, Laura stepped back into the safe house, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The final act was about to begin, and she was determined to see it through to the end. Little did they know, as they made their final preparations, that the true test of their resolve, and the most unexpected twist in their journey, was yet to come. The abandoned warehouse loomed before them, its dilapidated exterior a stark contrast to the high-stakes drama about to unfold within. Laura stood at the entrance, her heart pounding, the weight of a duplicate flash drive heavy in her pocket. Raphael and Leonardo flanked her, their faces masks of determination. "Remember the plan," Leonardo said softly. "We're just here to make the exchange. The real work is happening behind the scenes." Laura nodded, thinking of Pixel and her team, who at that very moment were launching a coordinated cyber attack on the Meridian Group's servers. If all went according to plan, by the time this meeting was over, they would have all the evidence they needed to bring down the entire corrupt network. As they stepped into the cavernous space, a figure emerged from the shadows. Laura's breath caught in her throat as she recognized Ethan Blackwood, the man who had approached her on campus with veiled threats. "Ms. Alvarez," Blackwood's smooth voice echoed in the empty space. "I must admit I underestimated you. You've led us on quite the merry chase." Laura steeled herself, her voice steady as she replied, "Where's Mateus? We won't do anything until we see he's safe." Blackwood snapped his fingers, and two men appeared, half dragging a disheveled but very much alive Mateus between them. Laura felt Raphael tense beside her, but a subtle shake of Leonardo's head kept them both in check. "Now," Blackwood continued, "I believe you have something for me?" Laura held up the flash drive, her face impassive. "Release Mateus first." For a tense moment, it seemed Blackwood might refuse. Then, with a casual wave of his hand, he motioned for his men to let Mateus go. As soon as he was free, Mateus stumbled towards them, Raphael quickly moving to support him. Laura stepped forward, ready to make the exchange, when suddenly the warehouse was flooded with light. Sirens blared outside, and a voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is the FBI! The building is surrounded! Come out with your hands up!" Chaos erupted. Blackwood's men drew weapons, their eyes darting wildly. But before anyone could make a move, a familiar figure stepped out from behind a stack of crates, gun raised. "Jason Chen?" Laura gasped, recognizing the man from the ethics committee. Chen's face was grim as he kept his weapon trained on Blackwood. "It's over, Ethan. We've got it all, the financial records, the emails, everything. The Meridian Group is finished." Blackwood's composed facade cracked, a flash of panic crossing his face before he schooled his features back into a mask of cool indifference. "You're bluffing. There's no way you could have accessed our systems." A slow smile spread across Laura's face. "You'd be surprised what a team of dedicated hackers can accomplish in 24 hours, Mr. Blackwood. Especially when they're motivated by justice rather than greed." As if on cue, Laura's phone buzzed with a message from Pixel. "Operation successful. All data secured and backed up on multiple servers. Checkmate." The warehouse doors burst open, a flood of FBI agents pouring in. In the ensuing commotion, Laura found herself being ushered outside by Leonardo and Raphael. Mateus supported between them. As they emerged into the daylight, Laura was struck by the scale of the operation. News vans were already arriving, reporters clamoring for information. She caught sight of Dean Harrison speaking with Victoria Hawthorne, both women looking equal parts relieved and determined. Leandro appeared at their side, his usually calm demeanor tinged with excitement. "It worked. The evidence is irrefutable. The Meridian Group, their partners, the corrupt officials, they're all going down." Laura felt a wave of emotion wash over her, relief, exhaustion, and an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. They had done it. They had exposed a network of corruption that had seemed untouchable, and in doing so they had paved the way for real change in the world of business ethics. As the adrenaline of the moment began to fade, Laura found herself surrounded by her friends and allies. Raphael pulled her into a tight embrace, whispering words of pride and love. Mateus, despite his ordeal, managed a weak smile, his eyes shining with gratitude. Leonardo stepped forward, placing a hand on Laura's shoulder. "Ms. Alvarez, Laura, what you've accomplished here, it's nothing short of remarkable. You took a stand for what's right, no matter the personal cost. You've changed the game." Laura looked around at the faces of those who had stood by her through this incredible journey. Raphael, Mateus, Leonardo, Leandro, Dean Harrison, Victoria Hawthorne, and so many others. Each of them had played a crucial role, coming together in ways she never could have imagined when she first started this project. As reporters began to approach, clamoring for statements, Laura took a deep breath. This was just the beginning. The exposure of the Meridian Group and its corrupt network would send shockwaves through the business world. There would be investigations, trials, reforms. The road ahead would be long and challenging. But looking at the determined faces around her, Laura knew they were ready for whatever came next. They had started this journey as students and professors, but they would continue it as leaders of a movement dedicated to reshaping the very foundations of business ethics. As she stepped forward to address the press, Laura felt a sense of purpose unlike anything she had ever experienced. They had faced seemingly insurmountable odds, confronted powerful enemies, and emerged victorious. But more than that, they had proven that with courage, integrity, and the willingness to stand up for what's right, real change was possible. The story of their fight against corruption would be told for years to come, inspiring a new generation of business leaders to prioritize ethics over profit, transparency over secrecy. And at the heart of it all would be the unlikely alliance forged in the crucible of this experience. Students, professors, and professionals united in their commitment to making the business world a better, more ethical place. The weeks following the dramatic takedown of the Meridian Group passed in a whirlwind of activity. Laura, Raphael, and their allies found themselves at the center of a media storm, their story captivating the nation and sparking intense debates about business ethics and corporate accountability. Laura stood at the podium in a packed auditorium at Berkeley, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd of students, faculty, and press. "What began as a simple case study has evolved into something much greater," she said, her eyes scanning the attentive faces before her. "We've uncovered a system of corruption that has long operated in the shadows of the business world. But more importantly, we've shown that it is possible to stand up to these forces and make a real difference." As she spoke, Laura couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. The challenges they had faced, the risks they had taken, and the unbreakable bonds they had formed along the way. In the front row, Raphael and Mateus sat side by side, their faces beaming with pride. Behind them, Leonardo and Leandro Montero nodded approvingly, the brothers united in their support for the cause that had initially divided them. "But our work is far from over," Laura continued, her voice gaining strength. "The exposure of the Meridian Group is just the beginning. We now have the opportunity and the responsibility to reshape the very foundations of business ethics education and practice." As she outlined their plans for a comprehensive reform of the business school curriculum, emphasizing practical ethics and corporate responsibility, Laura could feel the energy in the room building. This wasn't just about punishing wrongdoers, it was about creating a new generation of business leaders committed to doing the right thing. After the presentation, Laura found herself surrounded by a sea of well-wishers and supporters. Students approached her with questions and ideas, eager to get involved in the movement she was spearheading. "You've really started something big here," Dean Harrison said, approaching Laura with a warm smile. "I've been fielding calls from universities across the country, all interested in implementing similar programs." Laura felt a surge of pride and determination. "That's great news, Dean, but we can't stop at education. We need to ensure these principles are put into practice in the real world." As if on cue, Victoria Hawthorne appeared at her side, a glint of excitement in her usually stern eyes. "I think I might be able to help with that, Ms. Alvarez," The Board of Regents has been in discussions with several major corporations. They're interested in partnering with us to develop new ethical guidelines and accountability measures. The possibilities seemed endless, and Laura felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through her. They had taken on a corrupt system and won, but the real work was only just beginning. Later that evening, as Laura walked across the campus with Raphael, she paused to take in the beauty of the sunset over the Berkeley hills. "Can you believe how far we've come?" she mused, leaning into Raphael's embrace. He chuckled softly, planting a kiss on her forehead. "I always knew you were destined for great things, Laura, but I don't think even I could have predicted all this." As they stood there enjoying a moment of peace amidst the whirlwind their lives had become, Laura's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jason Chen, the undercover agent who had played such a crucial role in bringing down the Meridian Group. "Turn on the news," the message read. "Something big is happening." Exchanging curious glances, Laura and Raphael hurried to the nearest student lounge, where a group had already gathered around the television. The breaking news banner flashed across the screen, and Laura felt her breath catch as she read the headline, "Global Business Ethics Summit announced. World leaders and corporate giants to convene in response to Meridian Group scandal." As the news anchor detailed the unprecedented gathering of business and political leaders, all committed to addressing the systemic issues exposed by their investigation, Laura felt a wave of emotion wash over her. This was bigger than anything they could have imagined when they started their journey. Raphael squeezed her hand, his voice filled with awe. "You did it, Laura. You've changed the world." But Laura shook her head, her eyes shining with determination and humility. "We did it, Raphael. All of us. And this is just the beginning." As they stood there, surrounded by excited chatter and the glow of the television screen, Laura knew that the ripples of change they had set in motion would continue to spread, touching lives and transforming industries in ways they had yet to imagine. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with new challenges and obstacles to overcome. But with their unwavering commitment to ethics and justice and the strength of the alliance they had forged, Laura felt ready to face whatever the future might hold. The revolution in business ethics had begun, and they were at the forefront, ready to lead the charge into a more transparent, accountable, and ethical future. The sun rose over San Francisco Bay, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. Laura stood at the window of her new office, taking in the breathtaking view. It had been a year since the Meridian Group scandal broke, and the world of business had been irrevocably changed. The door opened and Raphael entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Ready for the big day?" he asked, handing her a steaming mug. Laura took a sip, savoring the rich aroma. "As ready as I'll ever be. I still can't believe we're really doing this." They were in the headquarters of the newly established Global Business Ethics Institute, an organization born from the ashes of the Meridian scandal. Laura, as its youngest ever executive director, was about to lead her first board meeting. As they made their way to the conference room, Laura reflected on the whirlwind of events that had led to this moment. The global summit had been a turning point, bringing together leaders from every sector to address the systemic issues in business ethics. Out of those discussions, the idea for the Institute had emerged, an independent body dedicated to research, education, and the implementation of ethical business practices worldwide. The conference room was already buzzing with activity when they arrived. Laura recognized faces from across the spectrum of business and academia. Leonardo and Leandro Montero were deep in conversation with Victoria Hawthorne. Mateus, now heading the Institute's youth outreach program, was setting up a presentation with Dean Harrison. As Laura took her place at the head of the table, she felt a momentary flutter of nerves. But then she caught Raphael's encouraging smile and her confidence returned. This was what they had fought for, what they had risked everything to achieve. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Thank you all for being here. Today, we begin the real work of transforming the landscape of global business ethics." As the meeting progressed, Laura was struck by the passion and commitment in the room. They discussed new educational initiatives, corporate partnership programs, and groundbreaking research projects. It wasn't just about preventing corruption anymore. It was about fostering a new culture of integrity and responsibility in the business world. "We've made incredible progress," Leonardo commented during a break in the discussions, But we can't become complacent. There will always be those who seek to exploit the system for their own gain. Laura nodded in agreement. That's why our work is so important. We're not just changing policies, we're changing mindsets. It's a long-term commitment, but I believe we're on the right path. As the day wore on, Laura found herself continuously inspired by the ideas and perspectives shared around the table. This diverse group of individuals, once on opposite sides of the ethical divide, were now united in their vision for a better future. The meeting concluded with a sense of purpose and optimism. As the board members filed out, many stopped to congratulate Laura on her leadership. She accepted their praise graciously, but in her heart she knew that this success belonged to all of them. Later that evening, Laura stood on the balcony of her apartment looking out over the city. Raphael joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked softly. Laura leaned into him, a smile playing on her lips. "I was just thinking about how far we've come. From a college project to this. Sometimes it feels like a dream." Raphael chuckled. "If it is a dream, it's one we're all sharing, and we're making it a reality every day." As they stood there enjoying the peacefulness of the moment, Laura's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Mateus. "Check your email. You're going to want to see this." Curious, Laura pulled up her inbox to find a message from one of the Institute's international partners. As she read its contents, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Raphael, look at this," she gasped, handing him the phone. "The European Union is adopting our ethical guidelines as the basis for new corporate regulations. This is huge." Raphael's face lit up as he read the email. "Laura, do you realize what this means? The work we're doing, it's changing laws, shaping policies on a global scale." The magnitude of their achievement washed over Laura. What had started as a simple case study in a Berkeley classroom had grown into a movement that was reshaping the very foundations of global business. As they celebrated this latest victory, Laura felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight in the name of ethics and integrity. But they had proven that change was possible, that a small group of dedicated individuals could indeed make a difference in the world. The horizon before them was bright with possibility. Laura knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. A united front of students, professors, business leaders, and everyday citizens, all committed to building a more ethical and transparent business world. As the sun set over San Francisco, casting the city in a warm golden glow, Laura raised her glass in a quiet toast. To the future they were building, to the challenges they had overcome, and to the unbreakable bonds of friendship and purpose that had brought them to this moment. The journey was far from over, but with each passing day, they were one step closer to realizing their vision of a truly ethical global business community. And for Laura Alvarez, that was a future worth fighting for.